Hello, and welcome to this week's Movie Math, where, it looks like we're not going to have a repeat of last summer, where many a long-running franchise went to the box office to die. But wait a minute, all these movies opened about the same. What's the difference? Well, there are a couple of differences. The big one is something we've been discussing a lot lately, and that's budget, right? Both of last year's box office bombs, Dial of Destiny and Dead Reckoning, Part 1, where there is no Part 2, it did so poorly. They're going to rename Part 2 as something else. Hilarious. But both of those movies ridiculously cost about $300 million to make, not including advertising. What? Well, that was partially due to having to stop and start production due to COVID, right? Although the strikes are creating some similar budget inflation as well. But these two were due to COVID, plus last-minute reshoots, as well as some flashy action sequences in VFX. It ain't cheap to de-age actors, we've discovered. Remember how much The Irishman cost? And they didn't even bother to de-age Harrison Ford's voice. So the whole effect didn't work anyway. It was ridiculous. All right, but meanwhile, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes made for just about half. And that was the movie of talking apes. Ooh, all right, everybody, let's have some fiscal responsibility, right? Then there's also, of course, expectations. Crystal Skull opened with $100 million back in 2008, while Dead Reckoning was following up the most successful entry in the franchise so far, and coming off of Top Gun Maverick. Everybody thought Tom Cruise, was golden. He was back, baby. He was not back. That film lost a little bit of ground opening weekend, but then it was hit with Barbenheimer, and that deficit only grew. In fact, it grew considerably by the time the film finished its worldwide run. As I said, they're not even calling Dead Reckoning Part 2 anymore, although it is the continuation. I mean, the first film didn't end, so it's still, even if you don't call it Part 2, I mean, I don't know how they're going to catch everybody up to speed. It was a great movie, by the way. It's a real shame that nobody watched it. It did okay on digital. But we're talking about Apes, all right? So Apes, what do you think of, did you eventually see Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1? All right, so Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes managed to gain a little ground on the last entry. Plus, ironically, franchise flops like Dial of Destiny and Dead Reckoning lowered the bar for what it takes to make Hollywood happy. They're like, this is pretty good. At least it's headed in the right direction. And it exceeded its expectations, whereas Fall Guy, just the week before, couldn't even meet its very low expectations. And Apes came in, at the end of the day, I'm doing movie math on Monday because it was Mother's Day yesterday, and it's almost $10 million ahead of expectations. So that at least seems like the movie business is very healthy. And so suddenly, there's a big if coming, or a but. So anyway, suddenly though, Apes is the belle of the box office ball, especially since no other movie in May, even Furiosa, although maybe we're in for some surprises, but right now Hollywood isn't expecting any movie to be able to open bigger than this. But here it comes. It's not all good news for Apes, because these audience scores are bad. They're pretty bad. Especially that cinema score. I mean, sometimes fans can game the Rotten Tomatoes audience score, but the cinema score is pretty concrete because it's done in person with spot polling, usually in the middle of the country. So that number is pretty good, pretty solid. And this is the lowest cinema score for the Apes franchise since Tim Burton's Redux over 20 years ago. And they didn't make any more of those. This did a little bit better than that, but a solid B. The fact that it couldn't get a B+, I mean, I would totally switch things up if I were running the Apes franchise based on these grades. What would you do? We're going to talk about it a little bit more. I got some more info for you and some more theories. Turns out, current Apes fans really loved the more complex intellectual approach. I did not care for it, although I'm a woman and you're about to find out that women don't really like the Apes franchise and certainly have not shown up for any of them, including this one. So the people who might have liked this movie the most weren't in the theater. So anyway, the people who do like the Apes franchise liked it the way it was, delivered by Andy Serkis and Matt Reeves. Although it's Dawn, by the way, not War, that is by far and away the most successful of the Caesar trilogy. In fact, War, as you can see, lost a lot of ground. So maybe that's one of the reasons they did decide to change it up a little bit for this new entry. But it seems we have yet another fandom that did not appreciate having their expectations subverted. One also has to wonder, here it comes also, if the film's strong female lead, I thought she was awesome, who, I don't want to give anything away, but let's just say she's far from submissive, and she's certainly not designed for the male gaze. You know, she's not a female character designed for an audience that's primarily male. This is a problem that Hollywood's been having. They design these great female characters, but women just don't show up to support them. The Caesar trilogy, by the way, had no strong female characters, which is, maybe one of the reasons I didn't care for it as much. I mean, I can enjoy a movie with mostly male leads for sure. It is interesting what different people gravitate towards. But anyway, this character might not have gone over well with the 64% male audience that showed up for Kingdom. Should the character have maybe been played up more in the advertising, although they didn't want to give away certain elements, which I thought were fantastic to be revealed. That's always what's really tough. If you wait to reveal something in the film, but nobody goes to see it, what was the point of it potentially? Maybe that's a way to think about how you should design films when you're writing them and directing them. How are we going to advertise this? Nobody can know, and therefore it's going to hurt the film's performance. We've talked about designing a film for trailers, the shooting schedule and having those trailer moments. Maybe this is something else that should be considered. How are you going to advertise it and yet still maintain some surprises for the film? War, back in 2017, had an audience that was 57% male. So it's always been strongly male, yet it was even more strong with guys with this latest entry. Why did Kingdom, on that note, come out for Mother's Day weekend instead of Father's Day weekend? And you know what Disney's releasing for Dad? Inside Out 2. How are these films not switched? I mean, I know that Pixar traditionally has released films in June, which is, I guess, why they did that. But I think they should have switched these movies. I think maybe more women would have gone if it hadn't been Mother's Day weekend. Good luck. I mean, I know some of you went with your mothers to see Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, which is awesome. Did you have a good time? But I do think that it probably hurt the film a little bit. And it still did very well, but maybe it would have done even better. But at least the Apes franchise delivered very strong diversity demos, and the overseas numbers, where the franchise has always done very well, were also solid. So that shows that this franchise, while it might have taken a wrong turn creatively, there's still strong interest. Hopefully it didn't mess it up too much. Perhaps because sometimes franchises can't recover, especially today when the marketplace is so crowded and things are going fast and furiously. But I don't know, I think the Apes can recover. I think this bodes really well for Andy Serkis's recently announced return to motion capture, but for Warner Brothers Discovery with The Hunt for Gollum, I'm like, oh, people like you, Andy, in this kind of space. Although, you know who it doesn't bode well for? Mr. Wes Ball, delivering a strong live-action Legend of Zelda movie. As a fan, I felt good about it because I enjoyed the movie so much. But when I put my business hat on, I think Legend of Zelda probably skews male as well. And this makes me very, very nervous about his ability to make the right creative decisions. I'd be like, maybe we should get somebody else. Largely because of the audience scores. Sometimes movies just don't connect, but the fact that the audience scores are so low, I'm like, I don't feel good about this anymore. I didn't feel good about it before I saw The Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes either because of the Maze Runner movies. I'm not feeling good about Wes Ball right now. How about this movie though? Does this Apes movie have a box office future? Well, not only does it have those weak audience scores, but it's about to lose its premium screens after just one weekend. And we're talking about a movie that did 44% of its opening weekend business at premium theaters. Just goes to show you the power of premium screens and that they really need to build more. What's taking so long? I know they're trying to do like some quick Dolbys, some quick Dolby changeovers, but they got to build more screens, man. I mean, they're obviously not going to be ready for this summer, but they should be working on them to maybe get them up for the holiday season. I mean, it's just getting ridiculous. Audiences have shown a clear preference for the premium format. Where are the premium screens going? Well, IF is taking over all the Dolby screens, while we'll see. Apes will probably keep some of its IMAX screens, but the Blue Angels dock is taking over a number of them this weekend before it hits Prime Video. And that's, I think, a very hot IMAX ticket. I'm excited for that. Still, though, a strong opening weekend makes Apes look good, right? Which will help with the film down the line. When it eventually goes to digital, maybe sooner rather than later, we'll see what its holds look like. but then also when it gets to Disney Plus/Hulu. In fact, the entire Caesar trilogy is trending in the top 10 on the Disney streaming service. They have all the Apes movies there. But again, it's only the Caesar ones that are up there. Wow. I think the fans have clearly spoken about what they want out of this franchise. So again, the franchise's fandom is strong together, but Wes Ball misidentified who is in that fandom and what they want. It's not just him, it's also the producers. Big mistake here. I would definitely make another Apes movie. I think the VFX are too extensive and therefore too expensive for a series. But what I would do is I would take a much closer look at the Caesar trilogy than the 1968 original film, which is what as I said in my review, I think Wes Ball and screenwriter Josh Friedman did. It's weird. This approach worked so well for Avatar, but it did not work here. Although I think more women show up for Avatar. Really interesting that this just did not click with the Apes fan base. I think that's who showed up. I think they didn't get people outside of the Apes fan base. I think if you went to see Kingdom, you loved the Caesar trilogy, and this just doesn't fit with that. We're doing some Monday morning quarterbacking, but let's hope these lessons were learned. Also, clearly you need a name. I thought Owen Teague did a phenomenal job in this movie, but clearly you need a name actor, preferably with an intellectual vibe like Andy Serkis, Benedict Cumberbatch, who hangs out with Peter Jackson to do the motion capture. So I think Benny C's too busy, but put on your casting director hat. Who do you think could replace Andy Serkis to head up the next Apes movie? Sorry, Owen Teague. I don't think they need to continue the story necessarily. I think it was a fine one and done. But they need another Andy Serkis type person. I'd say go get Andy Serkis back, but they clearly moved on from Caesar with this latest film. Andy Serkis has moved on to doing Gollum. Certainly they can't bring in Ryan Gosling to do the motion capture. Poor Ken, who's Fall Guy. We knew that people weren't into Ryan Gosling outside of Ken, and we were right. The Fall Guy fell 51% in its second weekend, and considering how poorly it debuted last weekend, it needed a stronger sophomore hold. After its second weekend, the rom-com actioner is at the century mark worldwide. And as we discussed last week, The Fall Guy's Achilles heel is its massive budget. Same with Challengers, which, despite a very good third weekend hold, that's excellent, but it has to make a lot more money to cover the budget that it has. Which, by the way, like all of these movies, does not include its advertising. Zendaya's PR is cooking, though, with Dune, Challengers, and then the Met Gala. Wow, phenomenal run. Not only significantly raising her profile, but making a star out of her stylist, deservedly so, Mr. La Roche. Roche is retired, but still works exclusively with Zendaya. Why? Well, I wouldn't be surprised if they end up launching some sort of business together. I'd be interested in what they were selling. Because after all, Rihanna's Fenty brand, which makes cosmetics and clothing, has made her a billionaire. Ka-ching! I think that's definitely the direction that they should go in, which is probably why they are building up La Roche. He's doing a lot of press, and he's good at it. I liked some of his quotes from some of his articles over the weekend. That headline over if you refuse to dress Zendaya, it's a no forever. He made some of the fashion houses look pretty stupid. It was great. All right, I bet they don't make that mistake with ingenues going forward. Although, are there any ingenues quite like Zendaya? And I really respect La Roche for sticking with that and not going back on it. All right, as for the rest of the top 10, some nice holds here. Although it looks like Phantom Menace was a one-weekend event, dropping 83% in its second weekend. Although the top 10 is so weak, it's still in the top 10. Still, last weekend's number 2 debut was a great headline for the Star Wars brand and allowed Disney to get out another very nice headline that Phantom Menace is the most watched Star Wars movie on Disney+. No wonder Filoni has become king over there. He built his empire off of Phantom Menace, as the Disney suits have had these numbers for a while now. Looking at Hollywood's top 10 worldwide for the year so far, you can see that with the exception of the top 3, it's pretty weak here as well. And on the bottom, there are movies that are just around 100 million that are able to be in the top 10. Whew, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is already pretty decently high up here, and it just opened. Last year, you needed about 500 million to get on this list, but most of the movies, to be fair, did come out during the summer or later. So there's still hope for 2024 to bulk this list up. even though it is very much feeling the effects of last year's strikes. But we'll see if there are some hits in store. Which movies do you think might be able to make it onto this list? Although, again, the bar's not very high right now. But it's been rough. It's been rough. Speaking of huge hits, Fallout is a banger for Prime Video, giving the streamer its biggest debut ever in the United States, topping the previous record holder, Reacher Season 1, by more than 1 billion minutes. The way they measure this is nuts. Why do they do it in minutes? Well, I think the reasoning is that that's what's important to the streamer, because they run ads on some of the subscriptions. And so that's done every couple of minutes. And so I believe that's why minutes are so important, or why that's been used as the way they measure viewership on streaming. Netflix, of course, has switched to, they divide their minutes by the runtime to give actual views on their charts these days. But I think that's to bring the numbers down a little bit more to reality, because they're dealing with how they pay people over there. So, I think it's internal, what's important internally versus perspective, and, not just with audiences and media and the general public, but also how talent feels they should be paid based on the information that they are able to get their hands on. Still the Wild West in streaming. Now, as you can see on this overall chart, Fallout has basically nuked all the other shows and movies with this massive number. But the record for Nielsen for shows is actually Stranger Things Season 4 with its first full week with 7.2 billion minutes viewed. So we'll see how Fallout does on next week's Nielsen chart, because this here, it started on the evening of April 10th, and this chart started on April 8th. So it's not a full week. Fallout is still trailing the Rings of Power when it comes to worldwide viewership on Prime Video. And by the way, the teaser trailer for Season 2 of the Rings of Power hits tomorrow during Prime Video's upfront presentation in New York City. It's upfronts this week, which is presentations for advertisers. Speaking of advertisement, it used to just be for network television and cable, but now it's also, of course, for streaming services. And Disney is presenting tomorrow as well. They teased Agatha, and so I think because of that today, so I think there's a very good chance that we might get some kind of look at Agatha tomorrow. This is the power, by the way, back to Fallout, this is the power of the binge. Both Reacher Season 1 and Fallout were binge drops. Although Reacher, like the boys, did then switch to a weekly release schedule. And that switch, even for Reacher, makes me think that Prime Video likes to get you hooked with a binge, and then they switch to weekly. So they'll probably do that for Fallout as well with its Season 2. Thank goodness. I do feel it's better for a show and the streaming service, because it just keeps the conversation going and people invested. I know some of you like a good binge, and I do too, but a lot of this stuff just it comes and goes so quickly. Reacher Season 2, that was weekly, and it still posted very strong numbers on the Nielsen charts. We'll see how The Boys Season 4 does. It's very hotly anticipated. And we even saw Season 2 not only on the originals charts, but also the overall charts often. Reacher Season 2 did extremely well, still as a weekly. Although, unlike Reacher, Fallout has some Emmy buzz already. So does Shogun. Although, as I told you, where there's an audience, there's a way. And sure enough, it was revealed late last week that star and producer Hiroyuki Sanada has just signed on for a second season of Shogun. And there are rumors that FX is going to move the show to the drama category at the Emmys instead of limited series. Shogun is definitely the biggest, hottest hour-long drama that Hulu and now Disney Plus has ever had. And so obviously they're eager to keep that prestige show going. Speaking of prestige shows, it warms my heart to see a stellar show like Ripley hold steady towards the top, even the top of the originals chart, with its first full week on the Nielsen charts. Let's hope some Emmy love here, and maybe even some wins, will get us another Ripley misadventure as well on Netflix. Then with movies, Wish fell off about 40% or so from its debut last week on Disney Plus. Still good enough. I mean, it was it was pretty strong last week with its debut, and this is still good enough to make it the top movie on its second week of streaming. But as you can see, movies continue to have a hard time competing with shows. But while Unfrosted is also the #1 movie on Netflix's charts for just last week, it's an incredibly soft #1. Yikes, debuting with under 10 million views. That's shockingly low. This is the result, though, of probably one of the worst publicity campaigns in history by Mr. Jerry Seinfeld, one he has refused to even acknowledge. It's been so bad, at worst he ruined his legacy, at best he significantly shrunk his audience. As one of you suggested, you might want to check out Hacks Season 3 to see how an older comedian can remain relevant and update their comedy and their persona for new generations. Heck, maybe Jerry Seinfeld should sign up for a roast. Deborah Vance just did a fictional one on Season 3 of Hacks, and Tom Brady. You know, you got to wonder, why would someone put themselves through that? Well, the rumor is that Tom Brady did it for $30 million. Where can we sign up? And it's number 6 on the show's list with just one night of viewership because it, of course, aired on a Sunday night. The roast also trended like crazy on social media for days. And while Cat Williams didn't trend so much this time like he did with the interview that got him this gig on Netflix, he is number 4 on the chart. Big week for Netflix with live content as the streamer continues to aggressively experiment here. John Mulaney, he had his live late-night talk show start during this time frame, but it didn't place on this chart. Sure, it was only for one night, Friday or Saturday, but only for one night, and then it ran for the whole following week. So we'll see how it does on next week's chart. But considering how low the numbers are here on the bottom of this show's chart, I think it should have placed. But then look at the competition, right? You've got Cat Williams and the very edgy Tom Brady roast, and then you have John Mulaney, who actually modeled himself very much on Jerry Seinfeld's work. So it's fascinating to me that both ended up being a little bit soft in their numbers. Perhaps both need a bit more edge to compete in today's comedy scene. Mulaney, of course, can be edgy, and so maybe, we'll see what the numbers are for his full week of programming, but he's somebody else who might want to maybe rethink his approach. Although, speaking of edge, wasn't it edge that got Seinfeld into trouble, not just with the comments he made on his PR campaign, but the January 6th and dead astronaut jokes and Unfrosted. Yikes, those were rough. Edge is an art form, you know, it is difficult to do. But it is interesting to see the comedy space maybe change a little bit and what it takes to stand out in today's marketplace. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this. By the way, as you can see, Baby Reindeer continues to be a massive success now 1 month out, with Netflix continuing to navigate tricky new territory as the show and the situation around it in particular continues to evolve in very unexpected ways. Piers Morgan interviewed the real-life Martha on Thursday, an interview that not only got millions of views on YouTube, but generated tons of media coverage for 24 to 48 hours. It was huge and gave the show yet like its second or third wind. But then also, on the other side, you have the UK government continuing to investigate whether or not Netflix and the show's production company handled the situation responsibly, considering the real-life serious accusations that the show contains. Very interesting developments, and so I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that as well. Then on iTunes, Dune Part 2 has finally been unseated by not only the new Ghostbusters, but also Henry Cavill's Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. While Abigail, which also just came out, is doing very well on digital also. I wanted to point out One Life, by the way. This is now available to rent. We've seen it in the top 10 before, but now it's available like a $6 rental. I actually watched this film a few weeks ago. It's extremely sad. I cried several times watching the movie, but it's a true story. It's quite remarkable and deserves to be seen, and it's very well told here. I would actually highly recommend this film. As for this coming week, 3 new movies open wide in theaters. If, which is tracking surprisingly strong. We'll see if that actually materializes. The Strangers, Chapter 1, horror, always strong, and Back to Black. While in limited release, you have that Blue Angels documentary, which will be on, as I said, some IMAX screens before it heads to Prime Video. But I mean, come on, if you're going to see it, wouldn't you want to see it on an IMAX screen if you can? On digital on Tuesday, tomorrow, Godzilla X Kong drops. Although Dune Part 2 is still a week or so out before it will be on Max. So there's a little overlap there in the digital space. While on Friday, Netflix has 2 new movies. Power, a documentary about the history of police in America, and also Film with a Unicorn. Quite the combo there. But with Netflix, it's really series that are big this week. With a look at the Ashley Madison customer leak on Wednesday. That's perfect. That's the perfect true crime, salacious stuff that does so well on Netflix. So I think that'll be big. And then, of course, Bridgerton returns with part 1 of its new season on Thursday. Netflix, they're not really getting into the weekly release schedule outside of their reality shows, but when it comes to dramas, breaking things up into parts has worked very well for them. I think they announced the new Cobra Kai would actually release in 3 parts with its final season. That's how they're keeping the conversation going. So a different type of strategy. Other series this week, the return of Outer Range on Prime Video, also on Thursday, while we have the series finale of Young Sheldon. I don't usually mention network television, but of course that show has blown up on streaming. This is the end of it. And not only will it be the end of the show, but adult Sheldon and Amy are set to appear. So I'm sure that scene will show up on social media, but you might want to check it out if you've been ever a fan of Sheldon in any incarnation. All right, and that's this week's Movie Math. What have you been watching? What do you plan to watch? And how do you think Apes will do as it continues at the box office? And what would you do with the franchise going forward based on these results? Not only box office-wise, but audience score-wise. Share those thoughts down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.